The Married Women Act 1957 and the Islamic Family Law Federal Territories Act 1984 contain provisions governing the status, rights, and the obligations of Muslim married women. The Married Women Act 1957 applies to all married women with the exception of Muslim married women whose property rights and obligations are subject to the provisions of Islamic law and Malay customs governing the relationship between a husband and his wife. The effects of marriage on the status of Muslim married women are covered by Sections 3 and 15 of the Married Women Act as well as Sections 127, 128 and 129 of the Islamic Family Law Federal Territories Act 1984. Sections 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10 and 11 of the Married Women Acts 1957 explain how marriage affects a married Muslim woman's property rights.
Today I'm going to explain a bit about Section 3 of the Married Women Act 1957, which is known as MWA. So in this legislation, we do have jurisdiction in Johor, Kedah, Kelantan, Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, Perak, Perlis, Selangor, Terengganu and the Federal Territory, which is Kuala Lumpur itself, and it regards to only Muslim married women and their property. Why this could be also said in personal status is because it involves privileges. Privileges means like a status of her own, her rights and commitments relating to Islamic law and Malay customs ruling. That husband and wife ties to extend in pertinent and in states of Malacca and Penang pertaining to Islamic laws of the state. So in this legislation, we can see that in this section, it is for sure that personal status is something very important for a Muslim married woman in order to keep her rights safe with her. This act also contains provisions relating to Muslim married women and their property. Like I said, rights are obligated to subject in under Islamic law also. This is why, because it also governs relation between husband and wife. So the Islamic law has to be involved in order to make sure a personal status is not being obstructed by the law. And for the next part is that under this, there is a case in Rui Kutina Bibi, MLJ 166. This case is that the wife had committed a criminal breach of trust in relation to her husband's property. A trust in relation is also involving a personal status which could affect her rights. Because of the wife that has committed a breach of trust, this is to a relation of her husband. Married Women Act was not applicable in this case because under Section 9, subsection 4 of the MWA, it prohibits criminal proceedings which contraries into Islamic law. So whenever there is a criminal breach, Islamic law will not allow you to actually see under this act. But in this act, you can also see that personal status has been obstructed. Hence, considering that Islamic prevails over Married Women Act according to Section 3, the court contended that a husband or a wife may undertake an action against the other spouse for cheating. Cheating can also destroy a personal status of a person if you're married. Fraud or theft of his own property committed while they're living together. So if you are living together and your wife or a husband, Married Women Act, okay, only for Muslim, if there is something to do with cheating or fraud, this is also against the personal status of a woman. Moving on into the next section, Section 15, subsection 1. Under this act, I would actually relate this to Section 15, subsection 2. Okay, let's go to the definition. This proclaims the rights and obligation of a married woman in the states of the same Johor, Kedah, Kelantan, Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, Perak, Perlis, Selangor, Terengganu and the Federal Territory, which is Kuala Lumpur. They were not impacted by the Civil Law Extension Ordinance 1951 or by the overturn, which is like the overturn of the judgment, paragraph 10, subsection A of the Civil and Law Enactment 1937 of the Federated Malay States by Civil Law Act 1956. So under the Section 15, subsection 2, I can cross-check with Section 15, subsection 1. It applies to Muslim married women and their property rights. I do say property, but there's also the rights at the back, which affects the personal status of a person. And duties as governed by Islamic law to reform regulating husband-wife relationship to extent relevant. So, under this law, you can see that this also applies both. They are referred to both act in order to make sure that the rights and obligation of a married woman, Muslim married woman, are being taken care of.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Noor Fardela 281927 and I will be presenting on section 127 and 128 of the Islamic Family Law Act. So, in a situation where a wife has been abused or ill-treated by a husband and she seeks for protection, her right to ensure that she will be protected are laid down in many provisions in Malaysia in order to protect her from her husband's abusive act. Mainly, Section 127 of the Islamic Family Law Federal Territories Act 1984 on the ill treatment of wife states that any person who ill-treats his wife or cheats his wife of her property commits an offence and shall be punished with a fine not exceeding 1,000 ringgit or with imprisonment not exceeding 6 months or with both such fine and imprisonment. This section regulates violence behavior towards their wife and urges the men to protect their wife, otherwise they are going to get penalized. Referring to the case of Muhammad Habibullah bin Mahmud against Farida binti Datuk Talib. In this case, the wife had applied for an injunction against her husband to stop him from assaulting, harassing, and molesting her as well as her family members. During the course of their marriage, the wife had been battered on numerous occasions by her husband. It was held that the court granted her application of injunction within the grounds of Section 127 of the IFLA. Now let's take a look at Section 128 of the IFLA. A wife's right to her own money and property as well as to own her husband's property has been promised in Islam. Therefore, there are statutes in Malaysia which incorporates it into the provisions in order to help the wife to own their own property and not being manipulated by their own husband. It is laid down under this section that any person who fails to give proper justice to his wife according to Hukum Syara commits an offence and shall be punished with a fine not exceeding 1,000 ringgit or with imprisonment not exceeding 6 months or with both such fine and imprisonment. This provision mainly governs that the husband will be penalized if he fails to deliver proper justice to his wife.
Section 129 of the Islamic Family Law Federal Territories Act 1984 focuses on disobedience of the wife. This section states that women who willfully disobey orders lawfully given by their husbands in violation of Hukum Syara are guilty of an offence and subject to a fine of not more than 100 ringgit or, in the case of a second or subsequent offence, a fine of not more than 500 ringgit.
MWA also mentions about the effect of marriage on the property for Muslims. There are two notable provisions that shows or illustrates the applicability or the relevance of this act, namely Section 2 and also Section 3. Under Section 2, there are two illustrations or words that we must look at or scrutinize, namely married women and also property. I believe that my previous teammate had mentioned about the meaning of married women. Hence, now I would like to discuss further about property. Generally, property means something owned or possessed by a person, for instance, goods, land, or building, which is very similar to what have been mentioned in this provision. And Section 3 mentions about the applicability or the relevance of MWA as long as it is in compliance with the Islamic law. It says that as long as the provision is not in contrary with the Islamic law, it is applicable. For further understanding, we can look at the case of R.E. Ketunabi. Further, in the context of Muslim married women's capacity over property, Section 4 governs this area, as it mentions that a married woman could obtain, retain, or even dispose any property, be sued or even sue in her own name, render herself and being rendered liable in respect of any tort, contract, or even debtor obligations, and being subject to the law relating to bankruptcy and to the enforcement of judgment and orders, as if she were a female soul, which means a woman without a husband. Generally, it means when it comes to the issue of civil status of a woman after marriage, especially in this context, Muslim women, any question between husband and wife as to the title or to the possession of property, either party may take action against each other in the civil court, according to Section 4. Hence, now a question may arise in everyone's mind as to whether Muslim women still owns the property after her marriage. Although the common law principle states that a woman or a wife cannot own a property after marriage, Section 5 of the MWA is contrary to the principle stated under common law because it empowers women to own property, the property belong to her or held for her separate use in equity as though she is a woman without husband. It also states that all property owned by a woman shall belong to her in all aspects, as mentioned before, as if she is a female soul or a woman without husband, and she can even dispose it accordingly under 3 circumstances. Namely, it was acquired immediately before the date of the incoming of into force of the act or held for her separate use in equity. Number 2, it belongs to her at the time of her marriage to a woman married after the date of the coming into force of the said act, Married Women's Act, if after the date of the coming into force of this act is acquired by or devolves upon a married woman.
I would now like to present regarding Section 8 of the Married Women Act, Gifts by Husband to Wife. Section 8 of the Married Women Act 1957 states that it doesn't give any validity to the creditors of the husband for any gifts gifted by the husband to his wife or any property that still remains under the ownership of the husband, and also the husband's money made by him or in the name of his wife in front of his creditors, because those things, they still belong to the husband, not the wife.
Now, we will be discussing if Muslim women has rights for the protection of property against her own husband. In conjunction with that, I will be discussing and comparing common law principle with the current act, which is the Married Women's Act. It is noteworthy to say that Section 9 as a provision regarding the property of married women governs this issue. Section 9 Clause 1 allows married women to sue in her own name for the protection of her property as if such property belonged to her, as though she is a woman without a husband. But previously, before MWA came into action, a wife cannot sue in her own name, but only in her husband's name. Section 9 Clause 2 of the MWA also allows the spouse to sue each other for the tort resulting from the protection of their property. However, previously in common law, spouses cannot sue each other as husband and wife since they are regarded as a civil union, so they cannot sue each other except in criminal cases. Whereas in Section 9 Clause 3 of the MWA, it provides that in this situation where there is a criminal charge or in any proceedings relating to property of a married woman, it is sufficient to allege that the said property belongs to her, which means the wife. Section 9 Clause 4 of the MWA discusses 3 situations in relation to criminal proceedings against a husband or wife. First, when the husband and wife are living together, no criminal proceeding in relation to property shall be taken by any of the spouse, which means neither the husband nor the wife. Second, when the husband and wife are living apart, but the act complained or occurred when they were living together, there shall be no criminal proceedings in relation to property to be taken by any of the spouses too. Third, when the husband or wife is leaving or deserting or is about to leave or desert the other spouse, criminal proceeding related to property may be taken against the offending spouse. Thus, on this ground, we can say that Yes, Muslim women has rights for the protection of property against her own husband, and Section 9 governs this matter, although she is a Muslim woman.
Section 10 of the Married Women Act 1957 explains that a woman is still liable for the debts and every contract that she contracted before marriage, even after getting married. The change in her marital status doesn't affect her actions done before marriage, be it being in a debt or even wrongdoings committed by her. This even includes the sums for which she is liable as a contributory, in which her name was listed in the list of contributories under and by the virtue of any written law relating to the joint stock company. If she ever causes any damage to the liability or conducts any wrongdoing in the contract she contracted, she can be sued. Section 11 of the Married Women Act 1957 explains that when a question arises between the husband and wife regarding the possession or the title of a property, it states that either one of them can apply the summon or in a summary way to any judge of the High Court. If the value of the property falls within the civil jurisdiction of the Sessions Court, the judge or Sessions Court judge may make any order he sees fit with respect to the property in dispute and the cost of and resulting from the application, or he may direct the application to be dismissed and any inquiry into the matters in question to be conducted in the manner he sees fit. It is also to be notified that the rights of a married woman of the states of Johor, Kedah, Kelantan, Negeri Sembilan, Pahang, Perak, Selangor, Terengganu, and the Federal Territory of Kuala Lumpur are not affected by the Civil Law Extension Ordinance 1951. Apart from it, any appeal to be made under this section also has to follow the order made by the same judge or Session Court's judge, because the case might be in pending action in the High Court or the Session Court.
As a conclusion, the Islamic law clearly signifies the fact that Islam is strictly against and prohibits ill treatment towards wife in any form, either battering or cheating her of her own property. The husband shall always ensure that he delivers proper justice and treats his wife with good care. Islam values the personal status of married women very highly and the effect of marriage that the wives will get involved with. Thus, these stated provisions that we have explained before truly help in making sure that the wives are protected during and after their marriage, as well as their own property and their personal status, including their rights. These provisions shall be well understood and upheld in our society in order to ensure that the society, especially the married women, are aware of their own rights in order for the Islamic teachings and the Islamic law to serve its purpose.